A nation at the brink. Scotland in 1314, on a rain-soaked dawn, hung between existing and disappearing. Exhausted by war but desperately yearning for freedom, it faced a critical moment where glory and ruin were indistinguishable in the fog. Robert the Bruce, king out of necessity, balanced between despair and hope, observing Edward II's approaching army. This glittering, confident force was unaware of the hidden, hungry marshes at Bannockburn. History paused as weapons clashed and dreams collided in Scotland's decisive conflict. Picture yourself in the early 14th century, surrounded by the sounds of battle and the chilling uncertainty. Scotland neared collapse, worn down by years of war against English control. The atmosphere was thick with tales of ruined villages, broken families, and a cultural identity under threat. This was more than a fight for land. It was a desperate struggle for the nation's spirit. Every fallen warrior whispered defiance. Every citizen's cry, a plea for freedom. In the deepest darkness, when all seemed lost, hope's embers glowed. Scotland's clans, long rivals, felt a growing urge for unity against a common enemy. A future where Scotland's spirit would never bend was spoken of. What was needed was a leader to shape scattered hopes into a united roar of resistance. Robert the Bruce, a king forged in conflict. Robert the Bruce, a man destined for history, took the stage. Born to privilege but tied by the complexities of the age, his path to the throne was dangerous. Some saw him as a savior, others as just another noble seeking power. In February 1306, he took control, crowned at Scone in a ceremony filled with urgency and resolve, a declaration to take back the sovereignty every Scot desired. With the weight of national hopes, Bruce's rule faced doubt. The English, under Edward I's iron will, had brutally tried to crush the Scottish resistance. Now against Edward II, Bruce faced a new, arrogant foe. With the tools of war at his disposal, his greatest challenge lay ahead, making hope a reality. The struggle for independence. As the story unfolds, Scotland's fight for freedom is a tale of resilience. Each village burned by English soldiers sowed seeds of defiance in Scottish hearts. This struggle symbolized a wider fight against oppression, a declaration of cultural endurance. Skirmishes, acts of defiance, quiet prayers at night, all built a resistance stronger than English metal. Scouts spread news of rebellion, uniting the land from lowlands to highlands. This determination came at a high cost. Countless Scots died, the land marked by martyrs for a new rebellion. Ordinary people turned to unconventional warfare. Ambushes, guerrilla tactics, even harsh Scottish winters became allies. These brutal raw methods depicted a people who would not surrender. Stories from this time merge with folklore, reflecting a nation's courage in conflict. The significance of the coronation. Robert the Bruce's coronation in 1306 was more than just formal display. It carried deeper meaning. At Scone Abbey, amidst old symbols and fresh hope, Bruce's crowning was a race against time, a silent effort to keep the crown from English hands or other claimants. In a fragmented kingdom, Bruce only brought together a part of Scotland's nobles, with suspicion lingering despite the circumstances. Like the Stone of Scone, support was strong but fragmented, requiring Bruce to unite them in defense of liberty. Stories from this period, blending myth and fact, are filled with loyalty and betrayal, unity and division, echoes that shape Scotland's lasting identity. The shadow of Edward I's victories in Scotland left deep scars on the Scottish spirit. Known as Longshanks for his height and Hammer of the Scots for his brutal campaigns, his presence was a looming shadow. Scotland, treated as a conquered land, had castles and garrisons as reminders of a kingdom under attack. Edward II's death in 1307 brought no relief. The machinery of conquest continued. For Bruce, Edward I's shadow was a constant threat, but also an opportunity. His expansionist plans had divided Scotland. Bruce saw a chance to unite the nation, turning past defeats into future victories, challenging what seemed unbreakable. Bruce's reign and strategy. For Bruce, becoming king was a start, not an end. His kingdom was tired from conflict, wary of political promises. As king, Bruce needed to be an inspiration and a fighter, an innovator and a strategist, stirring courage in his people. turning weariness into war cries. His reign demanded guerrilla tactics, abandoning castles for unpredictable forests. Thus, Bruce aimed to secure his claim, defy English power, uniting divided groups into a single spirit, writing a new story. English might and vulnerability. English power, supported by wealth, presented an image of being unbeatable. Their forces in intimidating armor and cavalry seemed designed to crush morale. But beneath this exterior were weaknesses. Such a large army needed skilled leadership, which Edward II lacked. Their tactics underestimated fierce Scottish determination and Bruce's resilience. Overconfidence led to their downfall at Bannockburn, exposing the myth of English invincibility. Stirling Castle, overlooking the central lowlands, was more than a fortress. It marked a path of control. Securing Stirling meant striking at Scotland's heart, a concept Bruce understood well. He made Bannockburn the site of defiance, using the threat to Stirling as bait. Keeping it would require a decisive fight. Stirling's complexity and strategic importance made it symbolic for Bruce. Gathering scattered forces, boosting morale, he changed its status from a symbol of desperation to a defensive stronghold, playing a high-stakes game with his aspirations, the awakening of Scottish spirit. Amidst hardship, Scotland's spirit awakened, energized by Bruce's leadership. It was a time of conflict, sacrifice, and cultural passion, pushing Scots from resignation to rekindled hope. Legends were born. Folklore created new narratives of defiance. This awakening wasn't just about military wins, but cultural revival. Scholars and storytellers shared tales of bravery and justice, creating a national epic written by Bruce and carried by the people. History was being made. As Bannockburn drew near, the stakes were immense. The battle was more than just a military encounter. It would test the truth of Bruce's ambitions. For the Scots, it represented defiance. Winning meant changing Scotland's future, rewriting the story of English dominance. Every Scottish heart carried quiet dreams for freedom, echoing like a clear call amidst Bannockburn's mist. Victory meant building identities not through submission, but through thriving freedom, the beginning of lasting Scottish sovereignty, an unshackled kingdom. A nation's hopes, on the brink, stand as a testament to Bannockburn, a battle not just for land, but for the future. Here, Scotland would secure its place in history, standing firm in defiance, shaping its destiny. Edward II's ambition and arrival. In the early summer of 1314, King Edward II of England stood on the hills, sure he would finally end the persistent Scottish rebellion. His grandfather, Edward I, had almost conquered Scotland, and Edward II wanted to finish the job. His huge army included heavily armored knights, skilled archers, and mercenaries from across Europe. Edward wasn't just sending an army north, he was putting on a grand show of power, a parade meant to remove any doubt about his strength. The royal flag snapped boldly in the wind, showing a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Edward's campaign wasn't just political, it was personal. He wanted to outdo his father, the Hammer of the Scots, underestimating the Scots. Yet despite this ambition, he underestimated the resilience and determination of the Scottish people. While he saw glory and control within reach, the Scots saw the upcoming fight as a struggle for survival and independence. Each noble and knight in his army sought personal glory, eager to gain Scottish land and titles. This was more than another military campaign. For many, it was a chance to improve their standing within the kingdom's complex hierarchy. However, in his eagerness for victory, Edward misjudged the Scots, seeing them as a disorganized mob rather than passionate defenders. He failed to consider Robert the Bruce's skill, whose knowledge of the land was a significant weapon. Edward, certain of an inevitable victory, saw the Scots as barbarians needing English order, not as a determined and united force fighting for independence. The march north. As Edward's army marched north, it felt like an approaching storm, casting shadows over the villages and towns in its path. Fear swept across Scotland. The coming conflict was seen as a battle for survival against an oppressive force. However, the Scots hardened their resolve, preparing to face an army unlike any they had seen. Amidst the gray skies and heavy atmosphere, a strong defiance burned, a sharp contrast to the approaching storm. The scale of Edward's army. The sheer size of Edward's military effort was astounding. Moving such a large army required careful planning, from getting supplies to coordinating troops over long distances. While quartermasters worked hard on logistics, problems were everywhere. Supply lines were stretched thin, vulnerable to attacks and bad weather. Stragglers and broken wagons marked the army's route, showing the huge effort it took to keep the machine moving. Maintaining morale was crucial. An army relies on its supplies, and any break could ruin Edward's grand plans. The complexities of loyalty. Edward's army wasn't only made up of eager volunteers. Feudal duties meant many soldiers marched out of obligation rather than desire. For some, the campaign was less about knightly adventure and more a burdensome journey into the unknown. The complexities of medieval loyalty were clear in the ranks, with political alliances and personal grudges influencing the motivations of those marching under Edward's banner. Overconfidence in terrain. Overconfidence filled the English camp as they entered Scotland. Edward II, riding proudly, saw his army's sheer size as an unbeatable advantage. He pictured his cavalry charging to victory, unaware how difficult his forces would be to manage on the marshy ground of Bannockburn. His knights, the pride of England, might find the mud a tougher opponent than any Scottish foe. The king's eye shin hit a crucial error. The terrain would test his forces as much as the enemy. As Edward bore the weight of the English crown, his confidence masked a deeper burden. His reign was marked by conflict and intrigue, and at Bannockburn lay an opportunity to secure his legacy. Defeat would shadow not only Edward, but the crown he wore. It was a test of his kingship, challenging him to step out of his father's shadow. Simmering tensions. Beneath the surface of unity, tensions existed. The variety in Edward's army reflected the mixed politics of his kingdom. Knights, archers, and mercenaries, each with their own reasons and histories, cultural differences and old grudges added to the unease. The further north they marched, the weaker their unity became. At night around campfires, quiet discontent spread. Nevertheless, the importance of the coming battle managed to suppress these divisions, at least temporarily, uniting them under the shared goal of conquest. The eve of battle. On the night before the battle, a strange calm settled over the English camp. Soldiers checked their equipment, looked anxiously north, and said prayers for God's favor. Edward II remained outwardly confident as he considered the coming storm. As dawn broke, the camp was buzzing with tension. The stage was set, and with unwavering confidence and the crown heavy on his head, Edward awaited the dawn, sure of his destined victory. The storm was about to hit, one that would not only test his army, but also define his reign and the fate of a kingdom. Choosing the battlefield. In the heart of Scotland, where mist clings to the moors and every stone seems to tell tales of old glories, Robert the Bruce prepared for a decisive confrontation. He was not just a warrior king, but a strategist with a plan. Bruce's experience in smaller fights had taught him the huge power of the land, how terrain could mean victory or defeat. And so he focused on Bannockburn, a place that seemed to call to him with the promise of strategic brilliance. It was a narrow, marshy plain near Stirling, a seemingly harmless location, yet perfectly suited to counter the English cavalry's strength. Here the land would become an ally, a hidden helper, aiding the weaker side in a seemingly impossible situation. The marshes and symbolism. Imagine Bruce leaning over maps by candlelight, picturing how the marshy ground could become a battlefield, like quicksand for the English. The marshes were like nature's traps, ready to catch the unwary feet of cavalry, turning noble charges into desperate struggles. And despite its deceptively open look, Bannockburn carried symbolic weight. Near Stirling, it was almost an invitation to challenge English pride, an echo of ancient times, a stage where Scottish bravery could face English arrogance. The battlefield wouldn't just be a physical space, it would be a place of defiance, where every patch of grass had the potential to spark Scottish resilience, shaping the landscape. As the soldiers stood ready to shape their destiny on the earth, Bannockburn's geography played a major role in the drama. Marshlands disguised as gentle meadows spread dangerously, ready to betray the heavy steps of armored knights. The terrain was no friend to those who didn't understand its secret language. The land itself seemed to whisper tactics, guiding the Scottish forces to set ambushes amidst its slopes and dips. Hidden by thick woods, Bruce's men disappeared like ghosts, reappearing only when the moment was right for confusion. Narrow paths created by the land forced the English into confined spaces, squeezing their ranks and making them vulnerable to Scottish defenses. Scottish ingenuity and schiltrons. Within this natural stronghold, Bruce's troops showed their cleverness in defense. They worked tirelessly, as if the very act of labor was filled with hope and defiance. Digging traps and creating obstacles, they shaped the landscape into a minefield. Here, a shallow pit to trip a horse; there, a cleverly hidden hole. Sweat and effort became allies, turning simple actions into strategic wonders. The schiltrons formed by Scottish spearmen were examples of discipline and trust. Each spear was a guard against cavalry charges, embodying Bruce's strategy to turn raw determination into unbreakable defenses. The Scottish spirit ignites. Yet not every battle is decided by cold calculation. In the Scottish camps, there was more than just preparation. A spirit was ignited, a strong energy that crackled like the campfire flames reflected in determined eyes. Highland clansmen, lowland warriors, and noble remnants stood united by a shared dream of freedom, a collective breath held in anticipation of dawn. Bruce moved among them, not as a distant ruler, but as one who shared their difficulties and felt their desperation. Stories filled the night air, tales of both victory and sadness, uniting the men with threads woven from their common past, contrasting philosophies of warfare. On the English side, led by Edward II, confidence was loud and boastful. Edward's forces, sure of their famed power, underestimated both the land and the men waiting for them. Overconfidence blinded their judgment. The English saw Scotland's strong resistance as just defiance, waiting to be swept aside. They saw their armor and numbers as guarantees of an easy victory, unaware that Bruce's cunning waited like a hunter in the shadows. The coming clash of cultures was not just about weapons, but also about beliefs. The English, steeped in the chivalrous display of knights and glorious cavalry charges, were about to face an enemy that favored practicality over prestige. Bruce's style was urgent and clever. His men found strength not in tradition, but in necessity, where every bit was hard-won, every breath a deliberate act of rebellion. As night covered Bannockburn, superstitions mixed with the tension in the air. Soldiers on both sides clutched charms, whispered prayers to gods they believed were watching the approaching fight. Omens floated like shadows among the campfires, every sound from the forest rich with potential prophecy. Each army believed divine forces favored them, viewing the upcoming struggle as one of heavenly approval and earthly justice. The Duel of Champions. As dawn crept over Bannockburn, its light revealing the camps, there was a tangible sense of anticipation in the crisp morning air. Robert the Bruce, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders, paused to gather his thoughts. His men, seasoned warriors alongside eager farmers, thrust into the abyss of war, murmured tales of ancient heroism, summoning the courage needed for a day that would define their nation's very existence. This was more than a skirmish. It was a meeting with destiny. Across the field, the English also felt this unease, but carried themselves with noble confidence. Convinced that victory was their divine right, their splendid knights gleamed in the morning sun, their arrogance a fog in the air. Yet beneath this lay an unspoken anxiety. Both sides knew that by the time the sun set, the future would be permanently changed. As the sun rose, two figures appeared, stepping onto the field where the air was thick with tension and the smell of stirred earth. This was no ordinary clash, but a duel between champions, an ancient custom where one man's bravery could shape the fate of thousands. From the English ranks came Henry de Bohun, an imposing figure in his shining armor atop a powerful horse. His confidence was its own armor, a living example of military courage. This was more than a challenge. It was a chance to break the morale of the Scots by killing their leader. Bohun rode forward, lance ready, while the eyes of an expectant crowd followed his every move. Bruce's decisive blow. Facing him, Robert the Bruce, less concerned with show and more with the task at hand, sat firm and determined. His horse was lighter, his weapon an axe, better suited for quick movement than charging. As Bohun charged forward, anticipation reached its peak. Bruce waited, timing his movement aside with such precision that Bohun's lance found only air. With a single motion, he swung his axe with devastating force, cleaving through Bohun's helm and sending waves of disbelief through the English ranks. That moment, now legendary, was a powerful demonstration of the strength of spirit and strategy. Impact on morale. The effect on the Scots was electric. What was once hushed anticipation erupted into a storm of victory cries, reviving belief in triumph against their seemingly unbeatable enemies. Bruce's successful blow was like lightning across stormy skies, a sign that the gods favored their cause. In him, they saw a leader who wore his crown not just as cold metal, but in courage and conviction. The duel's importance went beyond its immediate result. It was a turning point in the narrative, a beacon of hope energizing the Scottish heart. On the English side, panic set in, eating away at their resolve like a persistent shadow. They who were supposedly invincible were now staggering from an unexpected mistake. The fall of a favored knight at the hands of a lesser, unarmored warrior brought an unsettling dose of reality. Edward II's impressive facade showed a crack, an unannounced weakness affecting his troops' morale. Their earlier bravado dissolved into whispers of uncertainty. Could they truly rely on sheer numbers and dominion? Or was strategy the real decider of battles? These questions shook the camp's foundation, creating disagreement amid uneasy whispers, combat and symbolism. But in this medieval scene, combat was more than just flesh meeting steel. Each strike, each move, was wrapped in ritual and belief. The duel carried symbolic weight heavier than any blade, invoking a narrative rooted in justice and divine favor. To challenge and fall, as Bohun did, was to cast doubt on the English's claimed divine support and military superiority. To the Scots, this was a living story, a verse from whispered legends, where the brave, against all odds, were victorious. With every clash came a harsher truth. Behind the appearance of chivalry lay blood, grit, and grim reality. The duel and its brutal execution removed illusions of grandeur, revealing the harsh reality of combat, an arena where skill and fate performed their dangerous dance. Bruce's victory was less about bravery and more about survival, a stark reminder of war's brutal nature beneath its romantic disguise. For the Scots, the duel's legacy created a story far beyond the blood-soaked ground, a legend echoing through time, a symbol of defiance against oppression embedded in the national spirit. Bruce became a mythical figure. His axe stroked the highlight in a war song of nationhood. Generations would draw strength from this tale, a rallying cry against future chains. Beyond these fields, the duel's impact inspired desires for freedom, a simple heroism against historical chaos. Bruce's victory, capturing the eternal struggle for survival and identity, spoke to the courageous heart facing overwhelming odds. Transformed through culture, retold and reshaped, it continues, illustrating the shared human spirit, yearning for sovereignty and dignity against a vast, indifferent world. The morning of battle. Dawn crept over Bannockburn, hidden in a thick, eerie fog that clung to the marshy landscape. The scene before both camps was one of intense tension, palpable in the cold air. Scottish forces stood firm, emboldened by Robert the Bruce's victory the day before. Their schiltrons, tight formations of spearmen, gleamed with dew, quietly awaiting the English onslaught. In contrast, Edward II's soldiers faced the rising sun with a mix of confidence and worry. Their huge numbers offered some comfort, yet Bruce's choice of battlefield, narrow and marshy, made them question their advantage. Banners fluttered in the breeze, a promise of coming chaos. The English advance begins. As the fog lifted, the silence was broken by the clanking of armor and the nervous sounds of horses. Edward's army, grand and terrifying, began to move. The king himself, in splendid armor, encouraged his men with every word. But the reality of the terrain, crossed by streams and bordered by marshes, slowly became clear to them as an unexpected ally of the Scots. Each English step, they realized, would be met with fierce resistance. Each inch of ground bought with blood, the hammer against the stone. With a strategy like a hammer about to crush stone, Edward ordered wave after wave of his massive army forward. Foot soldiers advanced rhythmically, knights appeared like stars meant to shine and destroy. But as they moved, reality dealt its harsh blow. The wet ground betrayed them, horses slipping and struggling. The schiltrons stood firm, unharmed, deflecting charge after charge. The Scots held their ground, a testament to their clever strategy and deep connection with the land they defended. The strength of the schiltrons. The schiltrons, the Scots' secret weapon, were a formidable sight. Tightly packed warriors holding long pikes that formed an unbreakable wall of steel. English knights, used to cutting through formations, found themselves repelled by this impenetrable hedgehog of men and pikes. Weak points barely appeared, for the Scots moved like a single living being, reinforcing and responding in sync to every threat. Knights who managed to break through the line found themselves in a deadly cycle of close combat where survival depended on little more than raw tenacity. It was a brutal realization. Edward's huge numbers could not break through this defense. Terrain as an adversary. Meanwhile, the terrain, initially a minor issue, revealed its truly hostile nature. The marshy area was a bog, deceiving and frustrating the English's best-laid plans. Knights became stuck, armor and horses alike sinking into the marshland's grip. Coordinated movement was impossible, discipline dissolving into chaos, leaving targets exposed to the spearmen. What had been a threatening wave of advance got stuck fast in the mud of Bannockburn. The terrain favored those who understood its every detail, and the English, trained for open fields, found themselves at a severe disadvantage. Fragmentation of the English army. The afternoon turned the battlefield into a symphony of clashing steel and desperate cries. What started as a coordinated assault fell apart into isolated fights, the English trapped in a chaotic storm where unity crumbled under relentless pressure. This breaking apart was the weakness in Edward's plan. His carefully planned attack spiraled into a chaotic brawl. The Scots, aware of their advantage, pushed their attack, using their home ground to exploit every crack in English resolve. The initial English confidence faded, worn thin by the unyielding Scottish defense. Whispers of retreat spread through the ranks, largely unnoticed by Edward, but impossible to stop. For many, seeing familiar banners faltering and comrades dying was the most disheartening blow. The Scots used these weaknesses to cut deeper into the English formation, every insult pushing them further. The appearance of invincibility vanished, revealing the men beneath their armor, human and terrified. Edward II's struggle. Edward II, now in the middle of the chaos, found himself facing a test of leadership he hadn't expected. His personal resolve remained, never ordering a retreat, even as his commands had limited success. Despite his determination, the gap between expectation and brutal reality widened with each useless attempt to rally his forces. The king stood at the center of a crumbling tapestry, watching as his mighty effort dwindled under the weight of unexpected resistance. The breaking point en route. By late afternoon, the English lines reached their disastrous breaking point. Disorder and exhaustion took their toll, sparking a retreat that was more a panicked flight than a planned withdrawal. Hope faded beyond the horizon, leaving behind tired survivors and a king desperately trying to salvage some sign of victory. For the Scots, it was a clear signal to press their advantage, breaking into the weakened English formations. As the field of Bannockburn lay covered with evidence of the battle, the Scottish victory was undeniable. The rout of Edward's army turned a simple victory into a nation's tale of determined defiance. For Bruce and his warriors, this was more than a tactical win. It was proof of their spirit and strategy, an affirmation of their belief that a small, determined force could defy a greater power. The echoes of Bannockburn resonated not just through the Scottish Highlands, but across the kingdoms of Europe, inspiring tales and songs of triumph against the odds. The treacherous terrain. Bannockburn's landscape acted as a clever accomplice for the Scots and turned into a formidable enemy for the English. The marshy ground, treacherous under a deceivingly firm summer surface, thwarted the ambitions of every heavily armored knight. The horses, vital to the cavalry's strength, struggled as the earth shifted beneath them, turning noble charges into desperate stumbles. Each step into the mud was a burden, draining the energy of men who found themselves fighting the land more than their enemy. It was a grotesque dance where the ground itself seemed to want to drown the English in mud and blood. The psychological toll of the mire. Imagine the sheer horror of knights who, one moment, rode majestically across solid ground, only to discover their armor now weighed them down, almost pulling them into the mire. The cries of men merged with those of the animals, creating a soundscape of despair as both power and pride sank into the muck. The battlefield became an inescapable bog, erasing the differences between friend and foe. Nothing damaged morale as much as this insidious psychological attack. Every step could be your last, tempting fate to swallow you whole with each uncertain footfall. Mismanagement of forces. Edward II's approach to warfare relied on numbers and raw strength, with little understanding of how the battlefield's conditions had changed the situation. The English archers, famous for their accuracy and deadly arrows, found themselves useless in the pandemonium. Too closely packed and lacking clear views, their longbows became useless burdens instead of instruments of death. Edward's plan fell apart, his numerical superiority becoming a disadvantage that only weighed him down further, perfectly setting the stage for Robert the Bruce's clever tactics. The unraveling of tactics. Chaos took hold as the English realized their tactical formations were useless. Officers, voices hoarse and orders lost in the noise, struggled to create any sense of order. What had started as a disciplined push deteriorated into isolated groups of men acting purely on survival instincts. Their strategic advantage disappeared, as if spilled from a broken container, leaving soldiers without cohesion amidst the growing madness. The strong force that had aimed for domination crumbled into isolated groups of despair, struggling with both the Scots and the chilling realization of their failing strategy. The sounds of war. Across this frantic landscape, the sounds of war played a terrifying tune, amplifying the aura of chaos and dread. The clang of swords was more than just battle. It was an all-encompassing roar, like a storm's rumble, against which the Scots' cries cut like ghostly warnings. For the besieged English, these sounds were constant reminders of impending doom. They echoed more fiercely than any sword's reach, a chorus of muscle, metal, and rising panic, punctuated by those dreadful fleeting silences. A brief pause for humans caught between survival and surrender, where a single heartbeat felt the weight of fate's hand. Brutal close combat. The close quarters combat further removed any pretense of organized battle tactics. Tactics dissolved into immediate, brutal encounters, fought with the utmost desperation. Warriors plunged into the melee, and the roar of the crowd was replaced by the harsh, raw sounds of hand-to-hand fighting. Here, it wasn't mere skill, but raw, unrestrained instinct and determination that made the difference between life and death. Armor as a liability. In the thick of it, noblemen and peasants found themselves fighting side by side, the chaos stripping away social distinctions in the shared struggle for survival. Armor meant to protect often became a knight's undoing. Unhorsed knights found themselves trapped, their armor like a steel prison, making them helpless in the unforgiving mud. The shine of glory faded in the face of reality, with the earth claiming these proud figures not by the enemy's hand, but by its indifferent grasp. Their armor's weaknesses became obvious as swords found joints and gaps, death whispering through flaws in the craftsmanship. Nearby observers witnessed this grim spectacle where the knightly ideal sunk beneath a mixture of mud and mortality. The legends written here were vastly different from those sung in ballads. The spread of panic. Panic spread like wildfire through the English ranks, breaking the fragile thread of hope for an orderly retreat. Faced with an inescapable bog, previously disciplined units gave way to wild instincts, comrades trampling each other in desperate attempts to flee. The overwhelming smell of fear competed with the mud for dominance over their senses as a retreat turned into an uncontrolled rout. With their hopes of an easy victory dashed, thoughts turned to escape, leading to a breakdown of order as the promise of survival became a personal mission. Each soldier driven by the primal urge to run from the approaching doom. Edward's failing command. Amidst this chaos, Edward II found himself grappling with the collapse of his command. As his authority weakened, his voice sounded empty across the disintegrating field, a king fighting against a rising tide of disaster. What once symbolized the peak of power was reduced to a mere whisper in the storm, swallowed by the inevitability of defeat. His army fragmented before his eyes, and with it, his dream of conquest decayed, now an abandoned story of struggle. Each breath he took marked a fading chapter of imperial ambition, swallowed by the endless grind of earth, steel, and urgent retreat. stories of desperation and spirit. Yet amidst this pandemonium, individual stories of desperation and relentless spirit emerge. These tales, born out of chaos, became the whispers of legends and timeless narratives of endurance. Faces haunted by ruin and triumph alike carried away these moments. The battlefield's final song of both crushed hopes and undying embers of defiance within those who stood firm against destiny. The grim aftermath, the silent witnesses of the battle, corvids circling above, indifferent to human ambition, marked the field as one of profound tragedy. Their cries added to the dreadful chorus of that day, circling overhead as a constant reminder of the price of ambition. Survivors saw these dark birds as messengers of death, while onlookers surveyed the grim scene where medieval warfare met raw ambition. Each person who walked away bore witness to this tableau, memories heavy with the specter of their shared, turbulent past. A tale that, though bleak, would be forever retold for its lessons and its legend. The unexpected force. In the midst of the swirling chaos of battle, an unexpected force emerged from the edges of the Scottish camp. They weren't knights or trained soldiers, but rather the unsung backbone of the medieval war effort. The cooks, the blacksmiths, and various camp followers who had always worked quietly behind the scenes. These ordinary men, skilled in the tough work of cooking meals and repairing gear, suddenly found themselves abandoning their usual roles, spurred perhaps by the smell of victory or the wild pulse of the fight. On this fateful day, they stepped onto the battlefield with makeshift weapons in hand, kitchen knives, hammers, whatever they could gather. A psychological impact. Their arrival on the field was more a spectacle than a strategy, but it had a transforming effect. Like shadows suddenly alive, their presence struck the already exhausted English army as phantom reinforcements. Clad in soot-stained aprons and smelling of their trades, these camp followers presented a surreal image that felt like the final blow to English morale. Perception is a double-edged sword in medieval warfare, where the unseen was more powerful than the physical reality. To the beleaguered English soldiers, these unexpected figures seemed like the harbingers of an advancing Scottish line, an illusion born from exhaustion and desperation, chaos and retreat. The camp followers, wielding their basic tools as weapons of war, appeared invincible in the eyes of an army on the verge of collapse. Their noisy charge became a psychological earthquake that shook the English ranks to their core. The battlefield, already a blur of mud and blood, erupted into complete pandemonium. Cramped spaces and frayed nerves turned order into chaos as the English forces broke apart, and their discipline crumbled like a fragile statue under a rough hand. The contagion of fear. Fear is a relentless disease, one that makes its presence strongly felt during war. As it spread through the English lines, what began as hesitation quickly turned into a full-blown rout. This was the shocking power of the unexpected, where numbers became irrelevant due to the boldness and timing of an unconventional tactic. Panic seized the English soldiers, turning the great courage of knights and experienced mercenaries into a frantic scramble to escape. A wave of bodies driven by terror and circumstance. Disintegration of the English campaign. Under the Scottish advance led by the strange crowd of camp followers, the English campaign disintegrated. Their armor and pride weighed them down as moments of opportunity slipped away, transformed by the intense fervor of underdogs who wielded kitchen knives as instruments of revolution. Each awkward swing and clumsy advance sent shockwaves through the field, not because of their strength, but because of the symbolism of resilience sparked by necessity. The unraveling of plans, the sounds of clattering swords and desperate cries composed a harsh symphony over the stark landscape, a contrast to the silent retreat of ambition, burned by reality's harsh light. In this theater of war, lacking structure, the English commander Edward II could only watch as his hopes dissolved under the onslaught of an opponent whose weapon was sheer unpredictability, reinforced by human passion. That morning, Edward's plans had unfolded on paper. By afternoon, they lay in tatters beneath the feet of an advancing Scottish army. Meanwhile, Robert the Bruce, the mastermind of this daring defense, organized his complex blend of hope and defiance. He inspired his men not through grand gestures, but through a down-to-earth resolve that connected legend with reality. Psychological aftermath. As the day took a sudden turn, The psychological aftermath lingered like ghosts in the minds of the soldiers. For the English soldiers, defeat was an unshakable shadow that followed them beyond Bannockburn's fields, etching the bitter memory of panic. They left with more than just physical scars. They carried the whispers of a lost battle, foreshadowing what memory ensured would remain a haunting reminder. A complex victory. For the Scots, however, the victory was a complex tapestry woven across a land once threatened, now defying the odds in bloody proof of their collective boldness. Despite the jubilation, disbelief tinged their triumph, a recognition of the unpredictable value of desperate determination. The camp followers, largely anonymous in history, became unlikely knights in this strange skirmish. Their sudden intervention testified to the chaotic symphony of war, where chance met preparation in a dramatic dance of fate. The enduring testament. Bannockburn became a lasting testament to the resilience innate in the human spirit, forged from ordinary roles transformed under battle's unforgiving glare. It is in the overlooked corners of history where great stories are often written, where those seemingly powerless can redirect the course of events with mere conviction as their sword and shield. The camp followers' rise from obscurity echoes a timeless truth. In the theater of life's unexpected turns, ordinary hands, guided by unwavering purpose, can indeed challenge and shape destinies far beyond the margins. Here, amidst the echoes of a thrilling chapter, the irony lay in the triumph achieved by unknown figures, teaching us that hope and daring know no boundaries. They are universal, pulsing within each moment we dare to seize. The turning tide. On the battlefield of Bannockburn, the situation had drastically changed against the English. Once a formidable force, they now found themselves caught by the very terrain they had underestimated. The marshy, narrow ground trapped men and horses alike, turning fierce knights into easy targets for Bruce's clever trap. Scottish spearmen, arranged in deadly schiltrons, took advantage of the chaos, cutting down these armored giants whose formidable armor now simply weighed them down. Each fallen knight sent waves of fear and confusion through the English ranks, destroying their morale. It was a masterful use of terrain, morale, and leadership by Bruce, sealing Edward's fate from the very ground they stood on. Desperate measures. Elsewhere, fragmented groups of English soldiers fought desperately. Yet without a unified strategy, plans for a comeback faded like a dream at dawn. Panic swept through their ranks faster than any disease, breaking discipline and scattering them like dry leaves in all directions. Edward's grand army, once a symbol of strength and power, found itself collapsing under its own weight as fear ate away at their resolve. The English retreat. As the battle turned, Scottish forces pressed their advantage. Their cries, once a hesitant whisper of hope, now rang out as a triumphant call echoing over the battlefield. For the English, the idea of retreat, despite its shame, became more and more appealing amidst the unexpected defeat. Edward II, whose ambitions had painted him as the conqueror of Scotland, now faced the bitter taste of defeat in the harsh reality of retreat. His promise to claim the Scottish crown for England shattered, and with it his dreams of dominance over the north. Edward's escape. Amidst the wreckage of his failed conquest, Edward realized his priority was no longer victory, but survival. His royal standard, which had once flown as a symbol of authority, now marked his humiliating defeat. The way back was perilous, leading not towards triumph, but away from the battlefield of his disgrace. Clad in chain mail, Edward's escape from the field of Bannockburn became legendary. Though not for bravery or skill, his retreat was instead marked by the shame of fleeing from defeat. His bodyguards, fiercely loyal and clustering protectively around him, formed a human shield against capture. Their king's muddy path to safety was more an escape from humiliation than a dash to regain lost dignity. Each step away from Bannockburn was not just a physical withdrawal, but a journey burdened with the weight of crushing failure. Collapse of the camp. As Edward's panicked flight unfolded, the previously organized English camp behind him descended into complete chaos. Where order and purpose had once prevailed, now lay chaos and despair. Tents were reduced to collapsing shadows. Men who had dreamed of conquest now huddled as ghosts among their ruins. Supplies intended to feed an invading force became prizes for the victorious Scots. and spoils of war for those brave enough to seize them amidst the turmoil. In this maze of fading ambitions and empty tents, the picture of a shattered army was clear, echoing the devastation caused by Bruce's strategic genius. Final stands and feudal loyalty. Some English soldiers, isolated and without leaders following their king's retreat, faced terrible decisions. Some chose to make one last stand, clinging to the final remnants of chivalry and valor amid certain defeat. Their resolve was as enduring as it was tragic. The clash of steel and shouted commands was a futile echo against overwhelming odds. These final acts, brave in the face of certain defeat, were quickly swallowed by the day's overwhelming narrative. One of disarray and dissolution, of strategists unnerved and chess pieces lost in the chaos of the board. In the aftermath of Edward's retreat, the very foundations of feudal loyalty began to crack under the pressure of Bannockburn's lessons. Feudal ties, which bound men to their ruler through loyalty and land, were challenged by this spectacular military collapse. In wooden halls and stone fortresses across England, these oaths, once strong defenses, now bore the strain of defiance and rethinking. Knights who had questioned unwavering loyalty to Edward on Scottish soil found their confidence weakened by the hard realization of their king's failures. Impact on England. News of Bannockburn was carried beyond the blood-soaked fields, reaching English shores with an impact that went beyond a simple battle. England's lords and commoners alike were weighed down by a quiet reflection. The bravado of victory was replaced by the cold shock of defeat. History's grand story was rewritten, not in the ink of conquerors, but in the sobering colors of loss, casting shadows upon England's chivalrous history. Edward's attempts to regain authority were marked by an urgency shaped by the harsh lessons of defeat. Striving to mend a fragmented nobility, his efforts aimed at recovering lost strength. While the English struggled with their shaken identity, yet despite his determination, Edward's legacy would be vastly different from his adversaries. Where Bruce rose to the status of a hero, embodying the spirit of a free Scotland, Edward witnessed history shifting his story into one of struggle shadowed by misfortune. In that fateful moment at Bannockburn, Scotland shaped its future, forged in iron will and hardened resolve, a path carved through blood, honor, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. The dawn after. In the eerie calm of the dawn after Bannockburn, the ground bore witness to both the horror and triumph of the previous day's fight. The once loud cries of combat were replaced by an almost respectful silence, as if the earth itself recognized the significance of what had happened. Scottish warriors, victorious but tired, walked over fields stained with blood, a grim mark of a victory few had thought possible. For Robert the Bruce, this wasn't just a military win. It was a defining moment of validation for his leadership and the cause of Scottish independence. Echoes of triumph. News of the Scottish victory spread like wildfire, igniting celebrations in towns and villages across the land. Bonfires flickered into the night, a fiery tribute to those who had fallen and a celebration of newfound hope. Meanwhile, the English retreated with their spirits crushed, their once unshakable confidence now shattered. Edward II faced a harsh reality. His dream of re-establishing control over Scotland had ended in a humiliating defeat. While the war was far from over, Bannockburn gave the Scots a precious break, a moment to recover and gather strength for the ongoing struggle. Bruce's legitimacy. Robert the Bruce, once a king with a questionable past, now stood tall, legitimized by this dramatic victory. His unclear reputation, marked by past mistakes and rivalries, began to transform, portraying him as a national hero. The battle had silenced doubters and turned skeptics into allies, unifying the Scottish clans under his banner. Within the halls of the nobility, attitudes shifted as the victory highlighted the power of unity against the odds. Bruce's path forward involved smart diplomacy and strategic strength, pillars on which he sought to build a stable rule. Impact beyond Scotland. Beyond Scotland, Bannockburn's impact echoed through the complex web of European politics. The upset challenged the widespread belief of England as an unbeatable force, inspiring oppressed nations to reevaluate their own quest for freedom. Scotland, once seen as a minor player, now demanded global attention, forcing a re-examination of alliances. French eyes, always wary of English ambition, watched with fascination, seeing potential in a new ally. Meanwhile, Edward II struggled with reduced prestige. His authority weakened not only at home, but across the continent. A cultural renaissance. This victory was not solely a political event, it was a cultural rebirth. Bannockburn infused the Scottish identity with new energy, strengthening a narrative of resilience similar to the biblical David defeating Goliath. This spirit found its way into the arts, with poets and storytellers weaving tales that celebrated and immortalized the courage of those who fought. These stories were more than just entertainment. They were a beacon of national pride and resilience, planting the seeds of a distinct Scottish identity, separate yet vibrant against the English shadow. Faith and fortune. The battle also played a vital role in the realm of faith. For the Scots, victory strengthened the idea of divine approval, with the triumph seen as a sign of God's favor upon their cause. Such feelings provided both a spiritual uplift and a solid foundation on which Bruce could repair his once strained relationship with the church. Across the border, however, the English narrative was less forgiving. Edward II's failure appeared as a divine punishment, worsening his difficult position. Economic consequences. Economically, Bannockburn offered Scotland a moment of relief, a chance to breathe after years of relentless conflict. Freed from immediate threats, farmers could tend their fields, traders could reopen the roads, and communities could rebuild, each an act of defiance against ongoing conflict. In England, the financial burden of campaigns weighed heavily, further endangering Edward II's struggling reign and testing the patience of a burdened nobility. Tactical innovation. On the battlefield, Bannockburn left a legacy of innovation, showcasing Robert the Bruce's tactical genius. The use of schiltrons, dense formations of spearmen, proved revolutionary, reducing the dominance of cavalry and redefining the role of infantry in warfare. Commanders far and wide took note, eager to copy this strategy in their own battles. Bannockburn stood as proof that ingenuity and tactics could defy even the mightiest of adversaries, shifting perceptions of military power. The ongoing struggle. Yet for all its immediate effects, Bannockburn did not signal the end of Scotland's fight for independence. The road remained long and challenging, filled with renewed invasions and political maneuvers. Undeterred, Bruce relied on both diplomacy and military raids to strengthen his kingdom, while also fostering alliances that supported his quest. Bannockburn's enduring legacy. Today, Bannockburn's legacy endures, deeply embedded in Scottish culture and consciousness. It remains a potent symbol of courage and unity, an everlasting reminder that true strength lies in the spirit of a people. Celebrated in song, honored in memory, and forever relevant in the story of a nation, Bannockburn is more than just a battle. It's a narrative of resilience, a testament to the enduring fight for identity and freedom. In every sense, it is a tale that has left a mark not just on Scotland, but on the tapestry of history. The battlefield today. The peaceful fields near Stirling hold a story rich in blood and courage. Bannockburn, more than just a site of Scottish victory, stands as proof of resilience and a deep desire for freedom. At first glance, it might seem like any other quiet landscape, but for those who know its history, it resonates with the echoes of fierce battles. The Scots, driven by their pursuit of independence, fought not only to push back the English invaders, but also to shape their national identity. Much like Thermopylae for the Greeks, Bannockburn remains etched in the Scottish spirit, a place where legends were born and heroes were made. Symbol of the Scottish spirit. More than just a historical event, Bannockburn symbolizes the spirit of a people united by a common purpose. It transformed a desperate group of peasant soldiers and nobles into a force that challenged a powerful empire. The site embodies sacrifice and bravery, representing not just a past battle, but an ongoing inspiration for those standing on the soil today, feeling connected to their ancestors' courageous deeds that speak of bravery and an unwavering fight for freedom. Robert the Bruce's leadership. At the heart of this tale stands Robert the Bruce, whose leadership during the battle was as impactful as the victory itself. Understanding Bruce is essential to grasping the meaning of Bannockburn. He was not just a king, but a leader forged by conflict and hardship, resilient when others might have wavered. His sharp strategic mind turned a collection of Scottish fighters into a formidable force capable of challenging English power. The legend of Bruce defeating Henry de Bohun in the pre-battle duel captures the essence of grit and daring that defined the battle. A calculated gamble. Bruce's decision to confront Edward II at Bannockburn was calculated. It wasn't accidental. He understood the potential benefits and risks of his position. His choice to gamble the soul of Scotland on this battle showed foresight and dedication. The unity he created among knights, spearmen, and even camp followers rallied a nation into what became a formidable onslaught against English forces. The legacy of Bruce's leadership at Bannockburn shines through history as an example of strategic brilliance. The People's Army. The army under Bruce consisted of men whose lives were rooted in hard work and difficulty. These were not professional soldiers, but ordinary people. Farmers, blacksmiths, laborers, called from their homes and fields to fight for their country. Despite the stark contrast with Edward's armored knights, these Scottish warriors possessed something more powerful, an intimate knowledge of their rugged homeland. Their understanding of the land became a crucial ally against overwhelming odds. Wielding scythes and pitchforks, the Scots brought with them an unconquerable spirit unquenched by centuries of subjugation. For them, Bannockburn was more than a battle for a king, it was a struggle for life and legacy. With looming oppression, every thrust and parry in the nightmarish melee was fueled by desperation and determination, driving Edward's forces into chaos. The power of the schiltron. Central to Scottish tactical skill was the schiltron, a dense spear formation ready to face cavalry charges. This was more than just defense. It was a declaration of Scottish resolve against knights whom the English considered unbeatable. As the ground trembled with advancing hooves, the schiltron stood firm, a living wall of unwavering courage. This tactic not only showed Scottish ingenuity, but also highlighted adaptability in turning limited resources into significant outcomes. Edward II's fatal flaw. Edward II's overconfidence played a significant role in Bannockburn's outcome. His arrogance, combined with tactical inexperience, shaped the battle narrative as profoundly as any sword. Believing in the inevitability of English dominance, Edward's well-armed force was ready to crush the Scots. But his dismissal of the enemy led to miscalculations. His strategic oversight made defeat almost unavoidable, turning his pride into an unintentional ally for the Scots. The disorganized deployment of Edward's forces highlighted his overconfidence. His reliance on knights over strategic use of the terrain left his army vulnerable to Bruce's exploitation. Disorganized troop waves and the unyielding Scottish schiltrons turned potential victory into chaos, dismantling his grand campaign and marking a humiliating retreat. Bravery in chaos. Amid the chaos, Bannockburn transformed a simple field into a complex picture of bravery and confusion. In the melee, a unique change occurred. Out of disorder emerged a bond of survival. The shared experience turned chaos into victorious order, crucially shaping Scottish identity. Each charge, mistake, and triumph echoed the dream of sovereignty, inscribing freedom in the soil of Bannockburn, a testament to the human spirit and ingenuity. Accounts of the battle. Chroniclers of the time describe the scenes with rich human detail, capturing the essence of Bannockburn through the stark yet vivid accounts of soldiers and their struggles. Texts like the Bruce offer a lyrical testament to the Scottish resilience and tenacity forged in this battle, providing a living depiction of the raw emotions and transformative power of those tumultuous days. A rallying call. The echoes of Bannockburn extend beyond its battlefield, carrying forward as a rallying call for those seeking self-determination. It has become a symbol within Scotland's cultural fabric, a testament to perseverance against imperial power and a reminder of unity's strength. Today, pilgrims walk the sacred ground of Bannockburn, connecting with the struggle immortalized in the very fibers of the earth. It's a pilgrimage where the past mixes with the present, and visitors feel the remnants of courage and desperation that define the battlefield. Modern footsteps echo those of heroes, bringing history into the present, a tangible reminder of the relentless human pursuit against odds. History and myth. Bannockburn's place within Scottish identity exists between history and myth. It symbolizes resistance and the desire for independence, manifesting as both a poignant reminder of hard-won freedom and a guiding light for the future. By embracing its legacy, Scotland honors a tapestry of valor woven within its cultural narrative, a dance of defiance and freedom drumming beneath Bannockburn's storied landscape. And so the legacy of Bannockburn lives not merely as a chapter of the past, but as a vivid reminder of human resilience. If you've enjoyed this glimpse into history's tapestry, do like and subscribe for more tales of our shared past.